welcome everybody, and thank you for choosing the best workshop of the. You always miss out something when there's parallel sessions, but I can assure you that this is like the place to meet. So we've been thinking about this panel with the organizers quite a bit. It's an important topic, interdisciplinarity. So this panel is organized by the AI for Media project, and so we've been working together for 4 years. So it's maybe also similar to your projects. You know, when you are working together for so long, it's like, and then the project comes to an end. It's a little bit bittersweet. You know, it's nice to publish results, but it's also you make friends on the way, and you know, now you're rounding it off. So you know, having all kinds of conversations that are next to, say, the project deliverables, also conversations about what's next, conversations about the nature of international collaboration. And so from that, we thought, okay, in AI for Media, we are working together with partners from academia, both computer science, social sciences, humanities. We're working together with industry, working together with public organizations. And it's the composition of the consortium that allowed us to do the impactful work that we've done. So it's you know, if you take one of those away, then the impact wouldn't be same. You know, if, for instance, computer science research isn't also informed by needs from communities or you know, insights from law. We will talk about that more extensively later. Then you know, you don't reach the impactful societal impact that we were aiming for. So basically, you know, as we were doing this project, like, okay, let's also take the time to reflect a little bit on what it takes to work together in interdisciplinary fashion, but also how can we make sure that in other research programs, we know that now there's talk about, you know, what are the status, what's the scope of the 10th framework program. So how can we make sure that policymakers also take on board insights from us doing this work, and also in formulating the goals for the next framework project? So the goal of today is very ambitious, namely to first take a deep dive in what we took from our collaboration, and then we break out in 3 groups and actually also, you know, use the collective brain power to dive in a little bit deeper, and also to understand what it is that we would like to say recommend to the European Commission. The outcomes of this session today will be documented in a project deliverable, also in a blog post, just to make sure that this is captured and brought to the attention of the people that you know, are working on future programs. So with that, my name is Johan Oudman, and I'm working at the Netherlands Institute for Sound Vision. And we have a number of speakers online. So the names are on the sheet. So it's Peggy Valk, Nathalie Helberger, Patrick Eichhoff. And in the room, I'm joined with my fellow collaborators, Noemi, Anna, and Lydia. And so they will be mainly involved in the second part of this workshop, like I was mentioning, the hands-on part. But we start with the panel, and we decided that the best way to kick this off is to ask each of the panelists to respond to a single prompt, being, why is interdisciplinarity essential for doing research on responsible AI? So that's what we're going to do now for, let's say, 20-ish minutes, because we also want to make sure that we end, you know, in the 90 minutes that were allocated to us. Is that okay? Okay, super. And I'm thinking maybe now can we switch to the online? Can we show the panel online? Yeah, I think maybe Nathalie, it would be good if you would kick this off. That's fine with you as well.
With pleasure. So very good to be there virtually with you. And I'm really happy to be part of this project and also of these discussions about interdisciplinarity, also because during AI for Media, I think, as always, I have learned a lot about how important it is also. And what I really took from the AI for Media project is that AI is as much about technology as it's about humans, because technologies never function in isolation, but lend their function from the way they're adopted and used by people. That's especially true with technologies that are more and more used also in the media area, like generative AI or recommender systems, that are essentially the product of their interactions with people. The prompts we give them will decide how they function. And so to build technology that is adopted and used by humans, by all of us, we need to be able to understand not only tech, but humans and the way technologies implicate society, their routines and values. And this is exactly where interdisciplinarity comes into play. And something else that I noticed over the years is that much of the discussions of realizing public values and responsible tech still very much focused on the technology and how to make the technology more societally acceptable or trustworthy. And I think the recently adopted AI Act is a point in case that, again, must make sure that AI systems respect fundamental rights, safety, ethical principles, and very much imposes obligations on the developers of the technology. But and that is, I think, something that, again, we very much saw in our research for AI for Media, making AI trustworthy is not only a technological, but also a deeply societal challenge. And this is why, to make AI trustworthy and responsible, we need technology research, but computer science research, but we also need research that helps us to understand AI as the product of human interactions with a technology and the concrete context in which it's being employed, for example, a newsroom or a media organization, and also the various power dynamics at play. And to give you just one example, over the past years, we've seen a lot of discussions around recommender systems, news recommender systems on platforms, but also by media organizations, or think of large social media platforms. And we've seen that news recommenders sort how people receive information, and they can reduce diversity, but also increase the diversity of information content we receive. So one could argue that programming a recommender system to present users with more diverse information is a design choice, and therefore primarily a technological challenge that requires technological expertise. But in the research that, for example, also Anna has done in the course of this project, we also very much saw that diversity is a very human challenge. And thanks, for example, to journalism research, we now understand that for diversity in recommendations, it's simply also very critical that the tech developers can be in one room with the journalists and editors and actually talk about what they think diversity is. With the help of political philosophy, we can develop new and richer conceptions of what diversity actually is and why it matters. And with psychology and communication science research, we finally better understand when diversity in recommendations can maybe even backfire and have not the desired effects on the audience. So here the role of interdisciplinary research is very much to inform design requirements. Or take this human oversight. It's one of the prime strategies to ensure responsible use of AI is make sure there's a human in the loop. And so design interfaces that a human can interfere. But what does that actually mean? How to design an interface that, for example, a journalist or editor can effectively oversee? So here interdisciplinary research can very much help to ask critical questions and about some of the underlying assumptions behind technology choices. This is not to say that interdisciplinary research is easy, and I think also during the project we experienced some of the obstacles. I think one important obstacle is how projects are funded and set up with separate work packages, and then there are a lot of innovation technology development work package, and then the famous work package 13 is the societal or legal impact. And I think we need to think much more about horizontal ways of integrating the different perspectives. throughout the development cycle. A second challenge is the way we actually evaluate success of research endeavors. Researchers are still measured in terms of publications in their leading disciplinary journals. And in my own discipline, law, we prioritize solo authorship over teamwork. And interdisciplinary research is teamwork. It's deep, deep, deep teamwork. And finally, the training of our young researchers during interdisciplinary research always means moving outside your own personal comfort zone and exploring ways of working that you probably did not learn in your studies. And yet it's exactly here where so many opportunities for exciting, groundbreaking research lie between academics, but also industry and academia together. And I think these Horizon programs are very strong in promoting those. So I would like to conclude with some of my key lessons from AI for media, but also more than 20 years of interdisciplinary research. So what are some of these lessons? And I think everybody will tell you we need a joint language. I think that is important. But I think something else is really critical, which is joint spaces of mutual exchange and experimentation, both physical but also psychological. Physical, we all understand. It's much nicer to be there in the room, Thessaloniki, with you than joining from online. And I'm sure that the conversations you are having there on the table are much more fruitful, but also fun. But in the psychological sense, we need spaces because interdisciplinarity research is teamwork. And teamwork requires trust, respect, lots of patience, room to fail, to get up, learn, and also the ability and willingness to put your faith and parts of your academic career into the team. Third, I cannot overstate the importance of a joint mission. This can be curiosity to answer a question, but also societal mission. For example, to contribute to the better use of AI in the media. And here, projects like these Horizon projects can really help to bring people together with a joint mission. Fourth, we need to create conditions for interdisciplinarity to thrive in the way the projects are funded and set up, in the way young researchers are rewarded if they dare to move beyond their own discipline, but also invest in research leaders that are dedicated and have the mandate to build bridges, connect people and have a vision, create a joint vision. And I think this is something that we very often forget. Finally, and with that I conclude, finding effective ways to share insights with different disciplines and policymakers. Because so far we're very much trained on sharing our insights with people within our disciplines, but and especially a couple of years ago, it was still really difficult to publish interdisciplinary work. This is slowly changing, but it also shows that we require new feedback loops that help us to reach out beyond our traditional disciplines. For example, interdisciplinary journals, blogs, expert committees, and projects like AI for media. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nathalie. Let's move on. Let's move it along and give the floor to Peggy.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me well in Thessaloniki, where I wish I was for the moment, but unfortunately, other obligations prevented me from traveling. It's a pleasure to be in this panel. I will mainly speak from my experience as the lecturer of a course at our faculty called Interdisciplinary Study of Law, but also on the basis of my experience as a reviewer in ERC panels and in my current position as executive board member at the regulator for telecoms and postal services in Belgium. So as lecturer of the course Interdisciplinary Study of Law, I always start my course with the article in The Guardian of Zahir Irani, Dean of Management and Law at the University of Bradford School of Management at the time. It's a quite old article, actually already from 2018, but the title was, or is, The University of the Future Will Be Interdisciplinary. So according to him, the traditional departmental structures are preventing research and education from evolving. It's time for something new. So I take that as a starting point to critically reflect on, is interdisciplinarity, interdisciplinary research, and even interdisciplinary education and teaching these days, is it a necessity? I think over the years, I've come to realize that you can do great work also still today within your own single discipline. So I definitely do not want to minimize the value of monodisciplinary research, and I think it's still valuable and still necessary. So we definitely don't all have to go down the road of interdisciplinarity, because it's, as Natalie already mentioned, it is tough, it's difficult, because you're not always rewarded for it. You publish in journals that are perhaps not the highest in your discipline. So it's definitely not everyone's cup of tea, but it can be very rewarding. And so what I do next with the students is, let's distinguish the different forms of varieties of interdisciplinarity, because we use that term quite easily, but there are different shades. Like you have 50 shades of gray, there are shades of interdisciplinarity. So even within my own discipline, law, you can work somehow what we then call in an intradisciplinary manner. You can combine different fields of law. You can combine economic law with private law, with public law, in order to study a certain topic. That is intradisciplinary. You can take an economist and a lawyer to study a common problem, like how do we analyze the economic power of companies on these markets, and how do we regulate that? And everyone contributes to the problem with their own knowledge, with their own insights. That's labeled multidisciplinarity. Genuine interdisciplinary research requires that both disciplines are firstly at the same level, so they contribute to an equal amount to a problem statement, and secondly, they mutually reinforce, enrich each other. So a lot of research that we tend to label interdisciplinary is often only multidisciplinary. Again, because it's so tough to do truly interdisciplinary research. I think the examples that Natalie gave on how do we create solutions for responsible artificial intelligence requires truly interdisciplinary research. I've experienced it as a researcher in the field of privacy engineering, where we have had long discussions with our colleagues from computer engineering on how to embed data protection standards into their modeling frameworks. And we developed, after several years, something that was called the Data Protection Modeling Framework, that helps both computer engineers and lawyers to better understand how to tackle threats to privacy, data protection when setting up computer systems. But that required a lot of effort, and it required that both disciplines were on equal footing. And then you have the next step, transdisciplinary research, where the design of your project is, and the research itself is carried out in collaboration with stakeholders, industry, policymakers. So that is the second large component of what I try to do with the students at the law faculty. And then the next step is they have to experience a bit of interdisciplinarity themselves through a practical exercise. But I don't think we have time to discuss those here. What the next point I think I would like to make is that one of the arguments that I often use with the students to explain the value and the importance of interdisciplinarity is by simply stating that real life or the real life problems, they require this interdisciplinary approach. Yeah, I think the slides have gone now, but I have a great picture to illustrate how, if each researcher stays within his or her own discipline, that you only see part of the problem, and maybe it's a picture that you have seen before. Is there any way you want to go back to?
I'm a bit afraid something will break if we switch, but maybe.
Okay, that's a pity. Or we can come back to it after. I do not want to risk or cause any interruptions.
Yeah.
Can I share myself? Because that's perhaps, if I can share content myself, that's perhaps a solution.
Yes, I'll try to do so.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Look, it's a simple picture from a blog post on the importance of interdisciplinarity. So, well, it speaks for itself, I think. So here you have various people studying a particular problem that they think is the problem, but it's actually only part of the bigger picture of the bigger problem. And then you come to conclusions like, the ears of an elephant are being labeled as a fan, and the tail is being labeled as a rope. And obviously, if you see the bigger picture, you know that it's not true. But that's what you sometimes get if you stay within your own tunnel, or within your own. If you are too constrained to your own discipline, you often forget about the bigger problem, which is the real life problem. And I think in these EU projects like AI for Media, what we try to tackle are real life problems. These EU projects are often very applied. They need to come to concrete results. And in my view, that's typically the projects where you need to put together people from different disciplines at an equal footing, not just one discipline contributing to the other or being ancillary or being supporting the other, but really at the same footing. Why? Because that will increase the relevance of your research results, and that's of course something which now I experience in daily life as being in the telecoms regulator, that in order to be able to use the results of academic researchers, they have to be actionable. Yeah, so here as well in the regulatory agency, we have economists, lawyers, engineers working side by side every day. And we do rely on academic literature quite often, but then it is important that the researchers don't label the tail of an elephant as a rope, whereas actually it's part of an elephant. So I'm going to stop here, and I look forward to the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Peggy. And it's good to to make this connection with how interdisciplinarity also echoes in real life. I can imagine that speaks also to the imagination of the students. So moving along to Patrick. And Patrick, maybe you can make a brave attempt like Peggy just did and operate your own slide deck. What do you think? Are you up for it?
Yeah,
Okay.
sounds good. Give me a second.
Yeah. So now we move on from. So Patrick is working at the Fraunhofer Institute, so he's going to reflect through the lens of technology and engineering. So I think you're good to go.
Can you see the slides?
You're like brilliant. It's fantastic.
Okay, perfect. I got rid of the brand mark of the incredibly delayed slide provider. Thanks for that. Sorry, the formatting was a bit off. So Patrick Eichhut, I'm head of a research group here at Fraunhofer IDMT that deals a lot with media forensics and security. I think that, and I agree with everything that was said on interdisciplinarity, and that it is an extremely important topic. And I would like to provide a little bit of a technology perspective to it from our side in using one concrete example, and I think somewhat representative example, which is media forensics, which is also part of AI for Media, but also other projects to show that importance. So regarding R&D in that domain, media forensics to support the content verification and the identification of the detection of disinformation. One thing that obviously comes to mind immediately is when you do R&D in that domain, you have to cover many modalities and many relevant research domains, which go beyond any individual provider. So it is clear that interdisciplinarity, and there are many such domains, is an absolute must for that domain from the R&D perspective. There's no other way. And that doesn't just include modalities and research domains. It also includes very different methodologies, even on the technology side alone. We've not even started to talk about other aspects, and I'll do that in a minute. So statistics, signal analysis on various domains, machine learning with different aspects, et cetera, et cetera. There's actually many domains even behind the technology side of this, which is absolutely crucial to provide good results. And moving over to an obvious requirement when applying machine learning and artificial intelligence, which is, of course, more and more of a topic in that domain as well. Of course, you have to cover trust aspects. And I brought this picture on the right side, which just outlines the basic points. And just to pick one of them, and of course, all of them apply, but just to pick one of them, explainability, for instance, while this is something that in the end needs to be implemented and evaluated on a technical level, of course, the question of how to do that and what exactly you're about to do and what the requirements are specifically and how to test that are very intertwined. So it is not just a technical question, of course, but really it is a question of interpretation of results. It doesn't help to make a concrete example. It doesn't help if you provide some tools that would be understandable by machine learning and AI developers. And that is, I think, a little bit of a danger, and that happens sometimes, that people provide tools which they would understand and the community could use to understand how, for instance, a certain model reacts to specific cases and how to interpret that. But you, of course, cannot expect that to be also interpretable by users. And to engage in a discussion where users convey how exactly, what exactly does explainability and interpretability mean? How do you visualize it? How do you interpret it? And how do you provide it in a way that allows for specific actions, which is super important, for instance, in the case of content verification, because in the end, you have to make a decision about it. It's absolutely interdisciplinary. You can't do that without users and considering other disciplines. Moving from that level to another level, once you apply such technologies, of course, you have an intertwinement of humans and machines. It has been mentioned before. To make one concrete example in that domain, if such tools are to be used to authenticate and to verify content, it is a process which can only work if humans and machine or tools in that case really are intertwined and can work together. And you have to ensure that this really works, which by nature requires, when you develop such tools and when you evaluate, a very strong interaction between technology providers and other disciplines, and especially application providers who can do that, who can support that interactive process. And if you take finally a look at the bigger picture, like zooming out, so to speak, and this is just an example for that domain, but I think it goes for many domains. You have a very complex interaction between technology, the business and market side of this, law and norms, and the role of users and their different, let's say, strengths and weaknesses. Because you also, one thing that, for instance, in that domain is absolutely crucial is the role of confirmation biases, in-group bias, and in general, human cognitive biases, which also play a very important role, or on the other side, critical thinking or similar aspects on the human side of this that can help to address the problem and really solve it. And technology is just a piece within that and needs to be built in a way that is optimized to interact with all these different aspects. The problem is, while it's absolutely essential, it's also scarce, I would argue, because there are challenges. We speak different languages. Even within the technology side, you have very, very different, so to speak, languages and methodologies that you work with, let alone if you really cross disciplines completely. So that's a problem, languages and methodologies. You have a preference to stay within the comfort zone and sometimes also incentives. Peggy and Natalie already mentioned a couple of them. I would argue that in-group bias sometimes also plays a role, because if you're used to speak the language within your own tribe, so to speak, you have a tendency to maybe be a little more skeptical of other languages and methodologies that are outside of your tribe. Possible approaches, willingness and opportunity to communicate, of course, that's absolutely crucial. It's like a foundation to everything else. That's a no-brainer. The willingness to argue, so often there are conflicts. There are also conflicts of interest, and sometimes, especially when you do requirement analysis, you notice that not everything, it's not all harmonized. Sometimes you have conflicts, and the job is to constructively argue about them. In general, to constructively argue to find the best solutions. There's no way around that, and it's very important that there's a willingness to engage in that, I think. And to demonstrate the benefits, I think one of the main points is interdisciplinarity is so important for many domains that the best argument for it is actually you don't get anywhere without it in some cases. I mean, it's just the superior results that we should always demonstrate and remind of. An iterative approach, because it's so easy to, if you wait too long, you're getting, because you speak different languages and methodologies, you take different paths. And if you wait too long, it's too difficult to bring them together. And I would argue, and that would be, just have one more slide on that, just one point that can be helpful, I think, for projects is to use a well-defined and structured approach for R&D, especially for requirement analysis, system design, and evaluation. And I don't want to dive too deep into the details here. I actually have way too many slides, but just to outline it roughly, the basic idea is to intertwine all of this within a methodology that resembles the R&D and the development process. It's resembled here a little bit with definition of goals and requirements, system design, implementation, integration, testing. You know that from software development, especially in the case of AI, it works slightly different because it's more data, it tends to be more data driven, but you can combine this with a classic system design approach. Anyhow, I would argue it's really important to have, especially for the goals and requirements, and to some extent for the design of systems, to have a common understanding using a structured approach where you have something, and I would argue you really need documents, something written that you collaboratively develop to understand what the goals are. Here's just a couple of examples: user stories, capturing non-functional quality requirements, using so-called use cases or system use cases to describe what the system should do, then moving to various tools you can use for system design. That is more techie stuff, but then coming back to the evaluation of everything that you do based on the definitions of the goals and the requirements, and finally to ensure that this is considered for the AI development, which very often is a part within that development process, and to perform evaluation. And this iterative approach, to do that in an iterative manner on different levels and continuously for the different disciplines, I think is key. And a formal approach and a structured approach can be very, very helpful to facilitate that. And that's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. And it's when you were showing the overview of challenges and approaches, I was also looking at my notes of the points that Natalie made earlier with her key lessons. And there's, I think it's a good thing that there's quite some overlap. I think your point about this iterative approach is super valuable as well as we go into the next, let's say, stage of our workshop. We're going to say goodbye to our online panelists, but not before I open the floor for people if they would like to ask a question to them. We have a question. I will repeat your question, Raza.
Shall I?
Oh yeah, that's fine as well. Yeah. For the people online, Raza Bochita is now making her way to the microphone.
Hello, here it's Raza from the Netherlands Institute of Sound and Vision. I really appreciate all of your interventions, specifically that you spoke about interdisciplinarity as something quite concrete, rather than the way the European Commission usually talks about it as this vague buzzword that, you know, towards the horizon. This is what we do. This is how this works. And I was really triggered not only about what you said about the fact that work package structures kind of usually work against interdisciplinarity. And I was starting to think about, I would love to have a Horizon project where work package one would be socializing and building relationships. And for half a year, that's what we do. We learn to collaborate, we learn to, you know, appreciate each other's knowledge, each other's expertise. And then, you know, after that half a year, then we get into actual action, right? But I have a, yeah, my feeling would be that probably the funders, the evaluators, and also, you know, the people, department heads involved in these organizations would be, you know, would not take this seriously. They would not feel like this is, you know, something that we need to do, or, you know, feel that this is a waste of time and money, and why are we doing this? You know, we should already serious professional people. We should know how to collaborate. So do you have any tips how we can kind of change the minds and hearts of the people making those decisions to take these types of community building and learning opportunities more serious?
Yeah, who wants to briefly address this point? And Natalie and Peggy, your microphones are muted, so be aware. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so both Natalie and Peggy, but I would like to encourage you to keep your answer short and sweet.
Good. Really great point. Totally agree. We need space, time, and also more understanding how important forging these corporations are. I would say you are there in a building with a lot of people who hopefully fund these programs and build these programs. Maybe they're all even in a room. So I think that is the place to start. And then I think we want to produce a document or recommendation as a result of this discussion. And I think this will be a point very high on the agenda.
I see hope in the sense that at least at national level, in project proposals, there is a lot more attention to this type of community building, and it's mentioned explicitly in the work plan that, for instance, there will be young researcher meetings, roundtables, that's every 3 months, for instance. So I think there's definitely already more attention going to that aspect. Now, having said that, I think you should also be careful, because if you would pencil in a certain budget in projects in order to come together and have drinks, I mean, this is tax money going into research. So working in the public sector, I know how delicate it is to sponsor yeah, I would say social events, because you cannot create a perception that you're actually inducing people to have cocktails together. So you have to find a good balance, and it's always be presented as a professional activity, even though I fully agree that working together, it's working amongst humans. And if I may, Johan, to give one example of where I experienced that, the importance of coming together also physically was in the context of the negotiation on the convention, the Framework Convention on Artificial Intelligence. I was the vice chair of the first committee that developed the feasibility study and the elements document, and it was in the middle of COVID when we had to run meetings. And initially these meetings were online, but very quickly in the secretariat in Strasbourg, and we experienced all together that at least the chairs, the co-chairs, the secretariat had to be in one physically together in one room. And as soon as we could resume the on-site meetings again, we did it, because whether it's research or whether it's coming to legislation together, you need to have this opportunity to build trust, as Nathalie said, and that's what really matters, building trust. You do that in the corridors of meeting rooms, and you do that afterwards over dinners and drinks.
Thank you so much, Peggy. Final remark from you, Patrick, and then we are going to move along here in the room.
I would argue it's a very important point. I would argue maybe two things. I would also be slightly hopeful that it gets a bit more, you have a bit more room to maneuver. I guess it would be two domains that should come together. One is trying to put that, play with that and consider it for a project structure for the WBS. I think it plays a really important role. It sounds minor, but if you create the right links, even when planning a project, it can make a huge difference. And as I said earlier, I also think that the methodology and how you go about development also could make quite a big difference. If you have a clear project specific, there's no template you can use for every project, but there are building blocks you can use, adapt for a certain topic, and then establish that. That would be one element, I think. And the second, I guess, is really motivation. It's really, I think the best thing you can do is to show that it provides better results. Like nothing convinces more than good results. And interdisciplinarity is, in some domains, so crucial that you can argue you don't get anywhere if you completely ignore it. And if you can show that, I think you have many people on board.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is it a response directly to Patrick?
It's a response in the chat. If you are writing a recommendation document, might you also consider to have the project manager as well as the meeting facilitators, because they have most of the time methods in their heads that they use in order to get this work from the ground.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And so this actually, your point actually is a great pivot to the second bit of our panel. Can you change back to the slides? Yeah, let's say goodbye to our esteemed panelists. And as Peggy mentioned, the benefit of being in the room together, we're going to show now, you know, in terms of what Patrick mentioned, you know, it's all the proof is in the eating. So let's now have a dialogue. And the way it's going to work, we have 3 prompts. Let me navigate. Yeah, we'll manage. It's called navigating interdisciplinarity. So going very well. Oh yeah, okay. So like a recap of Patrick's slide deck. So yeah, let's give a round of applause to the panelists. We are with 12 say outside participants, and the rest are facilitators and our tech team. So my proposal would be that we split up in groups of 4, so I don't like to point, but it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, like this. And then so we have.
2,
okay, maybe I should point. Okay, so don't get offended, but it's like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then 2, you know, you can choose whatever you like to. So we have 3 corners. There's 1. Yeah.
Quick comment.
If I make just short questions, and then yeah, and then, so it now says you have 50 minutes to discuss one of the questions. That's going to be 10 minutes. So the facilitators, so Anna, Nomi, and Nadia, they will run you through it basically, and then we will reconvene and share the main highlights. So also this is the way to make sure that points lands on a post-it. So we will make sure it gets in our report. Now, Joe.
Yeah, it's just like I wanted to take the chance and quickly address everybody because you made a very valid point about the work packages and how they're not designed as ideally as they could be. And I'm I've been doing this for a couple of years now, and I realized that sometimes the communication work package like WP7 or whatever, it's just communication people only, and they don't know anything about technical aspects, and vice versa. So people do the requirements in another work package, and they're not properly communicated. And then you have like one really short blog post or one tweet, and the rest is like some strange paper. So my piece of advice would be that you can hack the system by bringing the engineers to the communication work package and bringing the communication/media people to the engineering packages. And that can be done by assigning like 1 or 2 extra person months. And that's something worth thinking about. The results will be so much better. But that's basically it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks so much. And also bring that to your group. So I would say that the people that are in number 1, they go there. Number 2, in that corner in the very back, and then number 3, that corner most. And right 4,